Welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. We're here to facilitate inspiring dialogues about the nature of consciousness across disciplines, communities, and practitioners, all with a holistic perspective.
From energy healing to somatic therapies, from neuroscience to meditation, we believe the most interesting things happen at the boundaries of disciplines.
I'm Christabel.
And I'm Keith.
Thanks for joining us today and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. You guys are in for a treat today. We are going to be speaking shortly with Ananda Abinou. I had the pleasure of studying with him many years ago at the very beginning of my seeking journey. Ananda had a spontaneous awakening experience. He's been teaching for 40 years or so. You're going to hear in this episode how his awakening brought him to understand reality at a fundamental level. And what is so fascinating is that he didn't study with any teachers or teachings, and yet what he describes is just like all of the spiritual traditions you'll hear about from all around the world. And so his sharing is a testament to the traditions of spirituality and their conclusions about its nature. Listen and be with this episode, meditate with it if you can, and feel into the space that Ananda holds or offers in connecting with him. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Field Dynamics podcast. Today we are with Ananda Abinou. Ananda achieved his enlightenment in 1973. And since that time, he's traveled extensively, giving freely to whomever sought his knowledge. In 2001, he released his teachings to the public in the book, I'm Not Coming Back, Talks with Ananda Abinou, which was edited by K.M. Anderson and published by Epoch Publishing. Ananda muses on all things consciousness related, from esoteric teachings to the very nature of reality. He has been called a Black Buddha and the sage of the West. Ananda, why don't we just jump right in? What is enlightenment?
Enlightenment is simply awakening. It's simply becoming aware. It is a position from which we can learn. I say this now, you may have other definitions from others, but this is my experience, because my experience was not through a teacher or a system. So the definitions will be from my personal definitions. So to me, that is what enlightenment is, the ability to see and to be objective about things.
Thanks, Ananda. Be honored if you could share a little bit with us about your personal enlightenment experience.
I was in a lot of emotional turmoil. I didn't quite know what to do. I was at a place where I was considering suicide. I had a gun with me, and something happened. For the first time in my life, I asked a serious question. Why is my life so screwed up? Well, the answer came back in my own head in these terms: because you're an asshole. Very spiritual, right? The thing that happened in that moment was I admitted what I had been in my life. I admitted all the lies. I admitted the lie personality that I had invented. Things began to fall away. As they fell away, I asked more and more questions. Finally, the question was, what is the answer to the world's problems? And the answer came back in this bold, light, love. And the acceptance of that everything began to change in me. So this was the moment of awakening. Now, I could go back some time in my life to when I was a child. I was a child who was alone. Not lonely, but alone. I was raised by my grandmother, and we would sometimes go all day and maybe 10 words would be exchanged. But she allowed me my space. And this thing used to happen. This sound would come. And everything would become light. And there were things in that sound that were new to me. Information. This happened several times when I was young, but I made other choices. At the first one, I think I was around 7 or 8, and I loved movies. And I realized in the middle of this wonderful, overpowering feeling that I didn't care about movies anymore. And that interrupted the process. At another time, this began to happen when I was around 12 or 13. The same process began to happen, that same light. Well, I realized that I was just beginning to experience my sexual awakening. I chose it. I chose to focus in that manner. So it's all a matter of where you're focusing in that moment. This was the beginning. The end of that process was that night when everything I thought I knew broke. And I say everything. And I say that because with many people, they get to that point, but the negativity inside them doesn't break. Everything broke. And I began to see the world differently. I began to understand it differently.
That brought us to a particular point where you're really emphasizing the power of choice, the willingness to be honest. I'd love to come back to that, but I'm really curious, what happened subsequent that night and that experience where everything fell away? Did your body have to start changing? Did your mind, was there a period of adjustment? How was the world being perceived differently to you? How did that change in that after that event?
My body broke out in a kind of rash that was oozing. I think this was because when you let go of certain ideas, there's a tension that you let go of. And in that moment, it allowed the poisons that were in my body to leave the body. And it left through the skin. It left in other ways as well. I threw up. But it left me absolutely clean and seeing the world with a brightness of color that I had never seen before. The ability to hear and feel things. The ability to understand the nature of physical reality, that it is a vibration frequency and it has consciousness. It's all alive. And so that day I was at a friend's house. I had gone to her house. I had no place else to go because I was down. And I left her house and the whole world was new. I left and I went to where I had been living, collected some things, and slept under a bush Out by the lake. I had a class to teach, and that was in downtown Chicago, and I was about 100 north, and I started walking. And I walked downtown. I did my classes, took about a day. And it was just the presence of people and the love was just overpowering. That was what happened that day. However, I had some questions. And my question was, is every human being what I had experienced that night? I took off to find out if that were true or not. And the people that I knew and people that I would encounter. And from there, I took off around the world. Various cultures, living in the culture, listening, watching, talking. And I found out we're all the same. And this became an obvious thing. The next light that broke in that time period was in the beginning, in creation. If there is only the creator, what was I created from? The answer came back in a blazing light, very simple. Itself. We are all itself. Oh man, the light shone within me, within my heart, within my abdomen, within my head, outside of my head. To recognize that I was it. We are all it. So these were some of the things that happened along that path. I learned a lot of things. I remembered a lot of things that I was taught as a young person that I didn't understand. I now understood. Peace was so thick, you could touch it. Love was so grand, you could touch it, you could taste it.
As you're describing that, Ananda, it feels like an incredibly visceral experience. Like as you're sharing that, like my body's even reacting to the share.
Good.
I'm really intrigued about the physicality of that process. You mentioned the throwing up, right? The releasing of the poisons, as you say it. Is this happening over the course of several hours? What's the experience?
Well, the throwing up only lasted a little while, but the oozing lasted, I'll say, maybe 3 days or so, and then that changed. But the feeling was of such a light experience. I never realized, and I don't think many of us realize, the tensions that we carry in our bodies. Sometimes I use a lot of religious references. Now, I use those because those are part of our societies. One was the idea, well, I grew up in the South. I'm a Black man this was time of Jim Crow and these kinds of things in the South. So I grew up with an incredible kitchen. I had to watch wherever I went. and to be careful about what I said. Okay, so all these tensions gathered in. From the moment of birth, you enter into a world that you don't understand. You don't understand the sensations. You don't understand the light. You don't understand. So what happens? The child, the baby, is stressed out. So our first experience in this world is stress, not to mention the mere fact of coming down the birth canal. You know, when you're 7 pounds, that's a pretty narrow passageway. So stress is all around. So what we do in that stress or that insecurity or that doubt is over the course of our lives, in situations we are unsure of, we build upon that stress. And we keep building on it, building on it, building on it. Well, in these moments for me, it was all gone. So the body, you have what you are as a being, which precedes the birth, the body. But what happens with the body, because the cells, the atoms, the molecules are alive. They are conscious. They are consciousness itself. When they come together, they form what I call the body mind. That is all the repetitions. That is your habitual behaviors. The ability to see and recognize things that we have seen before. So it's all a positive. It's just misunderstood. So you have the body mind and you have, let us call it spirit. I call it spirit simply because it's not body. It's not physical. So we have to have something else to call it. It precedes. It is what we really are. See, before this time, because of my conditions, I was a very angry person. I was in a rage most of my life. Okay. Just an example of when I was a boy, the man who lived down at the corner from me was taken by men and plowed in a field like a horse, fed the food of a horse. When his body broke down, they tied him behind a truck and dragged him up and down the highway in front of our houses. Part of them, of that group, were the police. Okay, so you see the situation I'm in. And as a child, I grew afraid because in order to protect me, my grandmother made me afraid. I was a child. All of that over the years just piled up more and more and more and more. So I was a raving lunatic is what I was. And that night, all of it went away. It all was gone. Understanding is the most wonderful thing. To understand and to accept what you find out. To accept the truth. That is, I had to accept my role in everything. I could have gone through, as I had done, blaming others, blaming the society, blaming whites, blaming everything. Yes, they were the stimuli for my life. But I made the choices. So now, after this point, I'm making a different choice. I'm making that choice because of the way I feel, because I now see beauty. I now see the magic of this universe. I see the miracle that it is. And in seeing it and embracing it, there's nothing like it. You become a different person.
Well, Ananda, your story is an unconventional one in the sense that this seemed to happen to you in a sense spontaneously. Like you said, you didn't come from a teacher or a system, but rather through pain and suffering and the willingness to let go of that in some radical manner, seeing through layers of distortion and the veils of perception of reality. And there are, like a famous teacher like Eckhart Tolle had a spontaneous kind of experience, no spiritual inclination, and through a series of questions said just kind of had a massive opening, a massive awakening. What was it that you did in those following years? You said you traveled the world looking around for maybe answers or to, I don't know. Sounds like there was a rich time afterwards where you were experimenting, exploring with other cultures, teachings and things like that. Is there anything you'd care to share about that inquiry you were making and what was happening for you?
Let me say this first. In all the disciplines of the world, I don't know, yoga, tai chi, whatever, there comes a moment when the question must be answered. It is not necessarily the exercises and things that we do leading up to that moment. It is coming to the moment itself. So all the other things, yes, they can be of benefit, I would imagine. I see people having successes with those things, and I use some of those things. But the point is coming to the moment when you let go. So the moment is a realization. Okay. Now, an answer to the rest of the question. What I did was observe. What I understood was that when we come into life, we begin to see things. People tell us what those things are. We accept that. So we create these gestalts. I'm a male, I'm a female, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm black, I'm white, I'm Asian, I'm whatever all that is. You create these gestalts. We accept believing in these things. So what does it say? We are all what we are by reason of the same process. We learn to be it. But one of the things that was beautiful about that night was someone once asked me, when did you know how to quit? And I said, when I got to that part of me that I couldn't throw away. That part that was the observer to the whole thing. The spirit, that which all things spring from. We say spirit, consciousness, whatever. But what we're talking about is the non-physically tangible. That is the only reason I say spirit as opposed to flesh or whatever. The issue is our willingness to be objective, to look at a thing separate from what I feel or I believe. We have been conditioned to put so much worth on what I believe. I learned how we respond, and that we respond through old things that are trapped in the body. These moments, and I call them moments of tension, where we lock memories. We like to think memories are in our head. They're not. They're stored all over your body. We form these groupings of energy, that in that energy is information about a moment. What we do is when we don't see clearly, we form an idea around those assumptions that we have already formed. That is the problem. So these are the things that I learned. I learned there's good food in the world. I learned just be yourself. Be who you are. There's nothing that you can do about what someone else thinks, whether it is good or bad. Just be yourself. And those two words slip out of my mouth time and time again, but what I'm really saying is not good and bad, but what is conducive and non-conducive. What is conducive to what you want and what is non-conducive. Which one do you choose? How do you understand what throws you off? How do you understand this? You know, it is the hardest thing in the world to understand is yourself, because you are personally involved in all the emotional bullshit. So the first step in that process, and learning from watching others, is objectivity. In order to be that, you have nothing left to lean upon. Now you can be objective. When you can't justify what you believe. But let's just look at it exactly for what it is and treat it exactly for what it is. Learn and move on. So these are the kinds of things that I learned by being with people. But I really learned that the differences between us are superficial. The beauty of it is that there's an automatic thing that happens when you really understand it. It's not that serious. It's not that serious. So you let go. When you see, we concern ourselves with good and bad, good and evil. No, there is one universe that is multifaceted. This whole world, including your body, is an illusion. What you are always has been, will always be. Always. So dying is not such a big thing. Sometimes you go, well, maybe I'm ready. But just take your time, let it come. How important is the physical? It's just a toy. Yes, it has pain, but it has that pain simply because it has pain that we can't get rid of simply because we don't know how. And when we come to see, we know how. When we come to do it, we know how. So it is not so important. Years ago, maybe 40 years ago. I had a heart attack. Okay. And some people say, well, you're enlightened. How can you have a heart attack? Because I used my body. I didn't try to keep it in a glass container. I didn't try to overprotect it. I fought. I went through jungles. You name it, I was in it. So I pretty much used it up. I had a heart attack and I was on the table and I found myself looking down at myself on the table and laughing. Laughing because the doctor who was trying to get my chest open was, he was not a very strong guy. He's trying to get a spreader in. Well, at that time, for my bench press, I benched around 395. And so he's up there and he's pounding away at this thing. And it just struck me as funny. And then I realized where I was. And it's like I turned the head that I didn't have. And what I saw was infinite potential everywhere. And I looked back and there was a woman, I think her name was Mariah from New York. She was sitting at my bedside and she was crying. And I realized, now here's an important thing, not just with my mind, but in this incredible feeling, this incredible energy, that I had more work to do. And the next thing I knew, I was back in my body. Okay. We exist beyond the body. So once we understand that, we begin to not take everything so seriously. It's just a part of what you learn. You see, we like to think good, bad. There is no good and bad. There is this side of energy, this side of energy. They come together, something happens. That which happens, if we are ready, allows us to understand the whole, not half, the whole. When we are injured, it is time to learn, grow, and move on. We don't always give ourselves the opportunity to grow. We think because something has happened to us, something bad, we've been blown up, we've been beaten up, or we've been robbed, whatever. We carry that memory all of our lives, so we constantly relive that. I ask the question, what kind of way is that to live? Say, but it's their fault. They did this to me. And I say, it's your fault. They threw the ball. You caught it. Now, the only way out of this is that you do what you need to do. Let it go. Okay? So, once we see that, we learn that we either have success in what we do, but we never fail. Something happens, we learn from it, move on. Understand. It gives us, the whole awakening process gives us an understanding from the perspective of, I'm going to use a word, God. Our perspective changes from that of a child to that of an adult. Adult being the great creator. So we understand differently. And we begin to create the world differently once we understand how it's done.
I'd love to ask you about collective consciousness and about how an individual factors into the collective and vice versa. And maybe as a second part to that question, as an individual within the collective, what do you see as our greatest responsibility in contributing to this world?
There is but one consciousness in this entirety of being. What separates us is belief. I believe that I'm separate. It's not true. But it's okay. I enjoy it the way it is. It's good. It's fun this way. You meet a beautiful lady, you're glad that she's she and you. So the difference is wonderful. It's a wonderful experience to have. But our higher thinking comes, we don't really know where it comes from, because there is no where to that. It is consciousness itself. And you are in the middle of the consciousness, and the consciousness is in the middle of you. So all ideas, all thoughts are in all people. Now, do we want to hear it? Perhaps we've been injured by someone that we want to hate, and the idea of love comes into our mind. I love, but I just can't stand that SOB. We block it out. The higher thoughts, the more gross thinking, body mind is closer to us. It's in front of our consciousness. It's like reading a book. Our behavior, our responsibility to be responsible, and this is the thing that's most important, is responsible. Someone will say, well, I have a choice. Yes, we have a choice about things, but we have a responsibility to ourselves and the whole. When we think thoughts and we do things about the whole, that is in the same mind. So the more people that think those lighter thoughts affect those people who think the lower thoughts. But it is being responsible to the truth. And if we are responsible to the truth, those thoughts affect them, which raises the level of consciousness of the whole thing. That's what we are in existence for, to raise the consciousness of the Mother God itself. And we do that by our behavior, by our actions, by what we see, the way we think. Yes, there are some pretty brutal things that happen. But that brutality is necessary in terms to get rid of some ideas. Back in the 50s, we had quite a struggle in the south of this country. But one day, there was a police commissioner named Bull Connors, I think was in Montgomery. They turned the fire hoses and the dogs loose on children. It changed the movement because people across America and across the world, okay, that's too far. You've taken it too far. You turn those dogs on the children. You turn those water on the children. No. Now everybody has gotten into the civil rights movement. But see, this is the same thing that happens in our greater consciousness. We get to a point of brutality where those of decent mind has to say, okay, that's enough. And we begin to think and to do things that are of a higher vibration. This is how we change things. The things that are bad to us are no longer so bad to us. I have been through, in the last few years, I broke my neck years ago. So we had surgery on that. I had cancer. The chemo almost killed me. I had a congestive heart failure. All of this with a smile. It's okay. Adjust to having a great life, having a joyful life in spite of what happens to you, in spite of it. But we learn that a part of physical existence is pain. I used to tell a story. It went something like this. In the beginning, the Mother God slept. In a moment, a movement, a flicker, a dream, creation. And the moment she saw what she had done, she immediately loved it. So one step removed from Mother God is Father God. One step removed from that is love, God the offspring. That story is a truth. We look at the direction that is. When we look at birth, and we will call non-form feminine, and we will call form masculine, because the sexual organs of the female extend within. So she is receptive. The masculine extends away, so we call that aggressive. In that union, something comes, a child. In the same way with the physical and the mental, the Mother God in here and the Father God here, when they come together, something new comes about. A new way of looking at life, a new way of experiencing life, a new way of creating life. The law is the law is the law is the law.
When we get towards the end of these podcasts, Ananda, we like to check in with what is happening in the person's life right now. Like, what are your interests at the moment? Do you have any aspirations or projects, ambitions? What's currently going on with you in your participation with life that you want to share with us these days?
See, that night when this all happened to me, I recognized that everyone should want to know this, because it is what some people call salvation. It is elevation, whatever all those words are. From someone once asked me, he said, "Yeah, you've been doing this since, 73? How do you come up with fresh stuff?" That's my job. How many ways can I present it, both with physical exercise, conversation, certain other experiences, to bring people to that part of themselves? And so that is what I do. I watch stuff and I watch people, and I have to come up with something new, something different, something they haven't heard. Because once you start doing it a lot and doing it a long time, People get used to it. They get used to hearing it. Well, I might come out with a string of curse words that you're like, where in the hell did all that come from? All I'm trying to do is get your attention. I'm trying to create that energy in you. If done the right way, if the individual looks at it the right way, we've had that happen. But now, what I do now, this is what I do. I think about it. I look at the entirety of this universe. It is in me. It is in you. What do I need to do? What can I do? The last thing that I can do is I'm at the end of my life, is use this tool to bring about a concept, an idea that someone uses. Pop. That's what I do. Those are the things that I've done for years now. And I am amazed at the number of things that you can come up with in 50 years. You see, one of the things about my relationship with people is there are things going on between us that they aren't aware of. There are things that I can do in response to what they can do to provide a situation that can provide the answer to the whole. I do that. Right now, I have to spend a great deal of time with my health sometimes. Because sometimes it's hard to put one foot in front of the other. Very difficult. But the fun part is in doing it anyway. See, that's the struggle in life. And overcoming the struggle is part of the beauty, and what makes you viable, makes you happy, because that energy, the energy that happens. That's pretty much what I do. Nothing more. Trying to get the message across to a small group of people. As I've said to people, I'm not a teacher for large groups. I'm too hands-on. Okay. Can't do it for large groups. I am a teacher for the West. There are things I say and the way I say them. You know, someone says something to me and I say, it sounds like shit to me. And they go, oh my God, that word you use. I say, how did it feel? It felt awful. I said, well, that's exactly what I tried to get across to you. What you said made me feel this way. So you see, the whole thing is different. I am a Westerner. And I've been with a lot of Eastern teachers. Matter of fact, I left here and my first visit was to India. And because someone said, there's this guy in India that sounds just like you. And it's like, I couldn't imagine that. Because I couldn't imagine that this had happened to anyone else. So I went to India and they told me, don't point your feet at him. Spend 30 seconds and move. Well, he wouldn't let me go. We ended up talking for an hour and a half. But what we understood is that we were both talking about the same thing, just differently. We also understand that just because a person grows up in an ideology doesn't mean they understand it. So rather than get all involved in all that, I come back where I was needed. I was needed among certain kinds of people. And that's what I do. That's all I do.
Thank you, Ananda. I don't begin to claim I understand it, but certainly in my experience in spending time with you today and being in your field, as it were, there's a multitude of movement and energetic exchange and dialogue or conversation, which I have only half an eye on and only half capacity to comprehend, but I thank you for that.
You are welcome, and don't worry about not understanding. I don't understand it either. You understand a little, then a little more, and a little more. Hey,
And thank you also for your gift of humor. This innate joy. It's much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Ananda, for your time and energy today, and letting people who are listening to this also just get a sense of who you are and the way you express these things and the importance of the message and what one communicates about these tremendous changes in consciousness and being and identity and the sense of the world, and how we can then reorient ourselves and walk that path in a different light.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the episode. What really supports the podcast is providing a rating and review of the show on your preferred listening platform. This helps us get the message out to a wider audience. If the topics we discussed today appeal to you, do take a moment to subscribe. Lastly, we invite you to check out our website, fielddynamicshealing.com, to learn about our training programs, private session work, and to see how we're setting the standard in contemporary energy healing. Many thanks, and see you next time.